Good evening, everyone. Good evening and welcome to the first candidate forum of this election season. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Karen Jones. I serve as the Political Action Chair for the NAACP Montgomery County, Radford City, Floyd County branch. We work as a team between the NAACP and the League of Women Voters to bring you the series of candidate forums for all of our local elections each and every year, because as you all know, Virginia has vitally important elections every single year. So it is my pleasure to first introduce to you all the presidents of each of our organizations, Ms. Deborah Travis and Ms. Jess Davis.
Good afternoon. As Karen stated, I'm Debbie Travis, president of the Montgomery County, Radford City, Floyd County branch of the NAACP. We're one of the largest civil rights organizations in the world, and what we do locally and across the country is to advocate for civil rights and social justice for all. We welcome you tonight. Thank you so much for coming out, being a part of this. Being informed is very important when it comes to election time, so we really appreciate your presence tonight. Just a little bit about our organization. We do meet the fourth Sunday of every month at 3:30 p.m., normally at the Old Hill Community School in Christiansburg, but we do rotate to different areas. So this coming Sunday, for example, we'll be in Radford, Virginia at the First Baptist Church, Rock Road. So you're welcome to please come and join us, see our secretary out in the hallway to talk about membership and get more information about our advocacy programs. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jess Davis. I use she, her pronouns and serve as the president for the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County. We are a nonpartisan grassroots organization working to defend democracy. And so we work in different ways to advocate, educate, and engage the people and voters to make sure that every voice is heard and every vote is counted. And so we have lots of different ways for you to get involved and engaged, different events like our candidate forums, as well as voter registration tables. And so we would love to see you with that. Both the League and the NAACP both have tables outside, and so I'd encourage you after the forum to come meet with us, chat. We'd love to talk with you how to get more engaged and signed up to be a member of both organizations. Thank you.
Thank you both, and thank you both for being such wonderful leaders of our organizations. And so tonight, for our Blacksburg Mayoral Candidate Forum, it is going to be moderated by Ms. Peggy Lane. And with that, I will turn it over to Peggy.
Thank you, Karen. And welcome everyone who has come out on a rainy evening here in Blacksburg and everyone watching online today or in the future. As Karen noted, the town of Blacksburg is holding its mayoral election this year. The mayor serves a 4-year term. Tonight's candidate forum will introduce 2 candidates who are seeking your vote. The candidates for mayor are Peter Macedo and Michael Sutphin. In preparation for tonight's forum, both candidates were provided with 5 questions. I'll ask 2 or 3 of those questions tonight, and all of the other questions will be from you, the audience. When you came in, you may have been handed a note card in order to write down a question. If you don't have a card and you would like to ask a question, just raise your hand and someone will bring you a card. When you've written down your question, you raise your card again and somebody will come pick it up and bring it to our question sorters. All of the questions will be screened for clarity, for duplication, for variety, and to make sure that the questions asked are relevant to issues that will be addressed by town council. So we're not talking about national issues, we're talking about local issues here in Blacksburg. I will address all the questions to both of the candidates. I will attempt to alternate who gets to answer first. I'll try to keep that straight. We'll start off. Every candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about why they're running for office, and then each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to answer each question. We're using the timing system here in town council chambers, so the little lights will come on, the green light will come on when time starts. We'll get a yellow light with 30 seconds left to go, and after 2 minutes have elapsed, the red light will come on, and I will ask the candidates to stop. After we've been through, after the candidates have responded to the questions, the other candidate may have the opportunity to provide a rebuttal if they so desire. And each candidate will have 2 minutes to make a closing statement. Are we ready to begin? Sure. Okay. And we'll ask the candidates to introduce themselves in alphabetical order, starting with Peter Macedo.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pete Macedo, and I'm a longtime Blacksburg resident. I came here because I wanted to go to school at Virginia Tech, but I chose Virginia Tech actually because of the marching band. See? My community in high school was marching band. I was not cool, but I had friends in marching band, and I had a community from that. So when I was looking for a school, I was looking for a community that I would feel comfortable in. I knew, so I'm studying physics, and the one thing I knew is that I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but I was pretty decent at physics. So I picked a school that was good at physics, and I picked a place that would give me more to do if I was wrong, and I was actually really bad at physics. So while I was here, I had opportunities to work with the university. I was at the university for about 13 years as an employee. I was director for Institute for Distance and Distributed Learning. Our focus was really to help support the faculty members to increase enrollment and decrease revenue to the university without physical infrastructure added to it, which is something that's really important right now. I then upgraded to being a baker, which I feel is probably the most respected profession that I could ever achieve at that point. And I really became a part of the community at that point. I felt engaged with everyone, with families and with other shops and other business owners, and also with the town. And that's why I feel that at that point, when Baker was the ultimate of being able to support my community, that I'd like to try mayor now. And I'm hoping that you agree with me.
Thank you. And Michael.
Sure. First, thank you to the NAACP and the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. These events are always a highlight of the campaign season. I'm Michael Sutphin, and I'm running for mayor of Blacksburg. For more than 13 years, I have served this community as a member of the Blacksburg Town Council. I've also served for 2 years on the Planning Commission, and I'm now on my second 2-year stint as vice mayor of Blacksburg. But my connection to Blacksburg runs even deeper than this. I arrived here in 2002 as an undergraduate student, just like many others who've discovered this town and made it their home. I've lived the full Blacksburg experience: student, working professional, homeowner, and now a public servant dedicated to ensuring our community works for everyone. Being mayor of Blacksburg isn't just any job. It's one of the most complicated positions in our community. We're a small town hosting a major university, balancing the needs of year-round residents with tens of thousands of students. This requires a mayor who understands these unique dynamics from day one. I bring something different to this race. As the first openly LGBTQ elected official in Southwest Virginia, I fought for inclusion and equality, values that make Blacksburg stronger. I've served on boards from the local to state level, building relationships that will benefit for our community. And I've spent years on regional planning bodies working with partners across the New River Valley to secure funding and coordinate solutions that no single locality could achieve alone. My 3 priorities are clear. First, we must invest in our community through infrastructure that supports our recent growth, from downtown revitalization to trail expansion to upgrading aging water and sewer lines. Second, we must expand opportunities for everyone by addressing our housing crisis with real solutions and by supporting our small business community. Third, we must build a sustainable future that preserves what makes Blacksburg special while preparing for the challenges ahead. In this race, you have an opportunity to choose experienced leadership that can navigate Blacksburg's complexities from day one. Together, we can shape a Blacksburg that works for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. And you've both addressed several of the issues in the questions provided, so I'm going to jump right into questions from the audience. So the Virginia Tech student population is expected to be around 40,000. What is your answer to the student housing situation, and what influence can you exert on the university to address this problem? And I'll start with Michael.
Sure. So I think that 40,000 figure actually came from an article that showed up in the Roanoke Times on the website today and is in the print edition today as well. It came from comments from John Rakovich, who's the rector of the Virginia Tech Board of Visitors. I'm not sure exactly where he got that number from. Currently, there are 31,000 undergraduate students and about 7,000 or 8,000 graduate students in Blacksburg. The article in the paper said that the university would consider an enrollment cap up to 40,000 undergraduate students, which would be 9,000 more than we have now, which is absurd. I don't think that our infrastructure could possibly support that anytime in the near future. There's no question that Virginia Tech has been the single greatest driver of growth in Blacksburg over the past decade. While I've been on the town council, the undergraduate population has grown by more than 5,000 students, and with that comes more faculty, students, staff, and others. That growth puts pressure on the town of Blacksburg, and we've all experienced that. Everyone who's been in this town has experienced the pressures that is brought on housing, our transportation network, our neighborhoods, and our utilities. Town council has taken a targeted approach to address the student housing needs. We have approved thousands of additional bedrooms, largely by encouraging existing student housing complexes to add density on their sites. But in 2019, we made it clear that this surge was over by passing a resolution saying that we would no longer support large new student housing complexes in towns except in areas that were supported by our planning studies and by our comprehensive plan. We later amended the town's comprehensive plan with a map of these areas showing where additional student housing would make sense and where it would not. At the same time, the town of Blacksburg has long maintained that the best place for student housing is on the university's own campus. We supported Virginia Tech's plans for the Student Life Village, but unfortunately, the Virginia Tech Board of Visitors had other plans. The town council has formally asked the board to reverse this decision and freeze enrollment until additional on-campus housing is built. Just this week, the board met to approve 600 beds of new construction in campus, a small step in the right direction.
Thank you. Peter.
That number is interesting. As my experience that I mentioned with distance learning, distance and distributed learning, total enrollment at the university is not total enrollment in Blacksburg. There's a huge push for growth at the extended campuses in Northern Virginia, Tidewater, all around, up in Roanoke. The professional programs are what makes the university money. We don't have to have additional physical infrastructure in order to have an additional enrollments. The one thing that Virginia Tech has not implemented and that we pushed for 15 years ago when I was the director was a degree completion program. Degree completion programs give an opportunity for students who have already been accepted to the university to finish their degree without being present in Blacksburg. Many people leave for lots of reasons, and they're fulfilling their education requirements at other institutions because Virginia Tech doesn't offer that, but they could. And one of the reasons that they haven't is because there's been no pressure to limit the amount of students in Blacksburg. If the town can pressure the university to reduce or to restrict the number of students in Blacksburg, they would be forced to use other means that are very viable and very profitable for the university. We're talking about the Board of Visitors' decisions, which are very interesting lately, because they canceled a program for housing on campus. And then 2 sessions later, they add a program for housing on campus. What's going to happen in the next session? Are they going to knock down buildings? Are they going to add more? We have no idea. We can't make our plans based off of statements like they're putting out now, especially in a time when we're going to have potentially turnover in administration at the state level that could make changes to the Board of Visitors.
Time's up. Thank you. What will be your role in working with the town of Christiansburg and the Montgomery County Board of Supervisors and School Board? I'll start with Peter.
I had a really interesting conversation yesterday with a member of the school board. And it really got me thinking about how Blacksburg can be supporting the school. So I'm not going to address all the different pieces because I think this is a good example of maybe some things that we could be doing. There's limitations as far as how much support we can give for the students of the public schools when as they're leaving and entering schools, so the K through 12 system. We don't have enough police to be able to patrol the area and make sure that students are getting home safely. Before COVID, there were opportunities for the students of Virginia Tech to actually help with that. And we had people who were going out to the schools and they were acting as guides and providing opportunities for safe travel home for the students, and also showing that they are a member of our community. I think there's opportunities like this that we can invite the students of Virginia Tech into our community to help us with things like this. They want to be members of our community. They want to be neighbors, and opportunities like that can help with that. I think we also have the opportunities to be neighbors to the folks in Christiansburg and to the Board of Supervisors, who are our main connection up, our next level up of working with the state. When we have issues with our town, those are the people we have to be able to collaborate with. And I think it's really important. I've had a lot of folks ask me, what are my political affiliations? Who do I support? I support Blacksburg. And whatever party is represented at the other agencies throughout the state and the county, I will work with them. And I think they all know that I will work with them. I think it's very important that you be independent in the position as mayor.
Thank you. Michael.
Sure. So throughout my time on the Blacksburg Town Council, I've been involved in regional partnerships and worked with others from the town of Christiansburg, from Montgomery County, from Radford City, and from other localities in our area. I've served for over 10 years on the MPO, that's the New River Valley Regional Planning Organization. That organization does regional transportation planning throughout the New River Valley and includes representations from Christiansburg, Virginia Tech, Pulaski County, Radford, and really works at sort of the long-term solutions and how we deal with some of our transportation challenges, and especially the funding that comes into our area. How do we best allocate that funding so that it serves the most people in the New River Valley? So I've worked on that committee for a very long time in my capacity as vice mayor, and in the previous time I was vice mayor, I've served on the Greater Montgomery Liaison Group. This is another organization that includes the mayors and vice mayors or their equivalent in the county from Montgomery County, Blacksburg, and Christiansburg, and we work through issues that come up every single month in our community, whether that's how to expand access to child care, how to deal with major events coming up, how to support our small business community when there's a slump over the summer. We've talked about all sorts of issues and how that we can work together as a community. I think the town of Blacksburg probably has a little bit less interaction with the school system. In Virginia, towns don't have an educational component that's done through counties and cities, but that Montgomery Regional Committee I just mentioned does include school board representation as well, so we do have good conversations. I've seen our regional partnerships go up and down during my time on the town council. Certainly when we were having discussions about the future of the old Blacksburg Middle School property, there were some tense conversations there, but I think that we're on the up right now, and I would like to continue to see it that way.
Thank you. How will you involve neighbors and neighborhoods in development decisions other than listening?
Started me. Citizen input is an incredibly important part of our public process. So when development proposals come forward to the town, there is a notice that's sent out to property owners that live within a certain radius of that to notify them about what's happening. There are neighborhood meetings that are had, which is a way for the town of Blacksburg to get feedback from citizens. Then it goes to the Planning Commission, and then there's a Planning Commission work session and a Planning Commission public hearing where there's an opportunity for public feedback. And then ultimately goes to the town council for a final vote where there's another opportunity for members of the public, for our neighborhoods to share their perspective on what's happening, what sort of development proposals are in front of us. Listening is certainly a very important part of the process and something that's come up during this campaign season. I do think that there's more that we can do to make sure that we are listening to our citizens. Like I mentioned, a notice is sent out to property owners. I think the town of Blacksburg could also send out a notice to renters, whether that's residents that are living nearby or people who are leasing commercial spaces that are near proposed development. I think we could work on improving the notification process for that. Another idea I had was, which is not coming from me, but others, I've seen that the members of the Montgomery County School Board and the Board of Supervisors have had what they call mobile town halls, where they're in their district and they're meeting with residents together. I think we could do something like that so that when people are coming and speaking with town council members, it's not always because there's something in front of the town council, like a contentious land use types of requests, which is often when we do hear and speak to people. But I think it would be important for the town of Blacksburg to, and the leadership within the town of Blacksburg, to hear from residents at other times as well and involve those neighborhood, those civic groups, and those community organizations.
Thank you. Peter.
I'm glad you mentioned the renters notification thing, because that was something I actually brought up to town council when I addressed them before. With the 801 North Main project, I was a business owner who was renting in a building across from it. I never heard anything about it at all. I was never notified at all. I saw a sign, and that was it. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's nice to hear my words again. The mobile town hall idea, I think, is excellent. I think that it's easy to do, and I've actually been doing that. We've been having events for the past 2 months. We call it Popsicles in the Park every Wednesday. We had one last night. It's an opportunity for people to get together and talk with really nothing other than that. To learn about me, of course, and about my campaign. But I see a lot of faces out here of folks who have come out to that. And that's something that I think we can encourage to do. It's hard for me to understand when this question is asked that it was started out really addressing the whole process that goes on with development. Notification of people that things are going to be happening, signs going up, it goes to Planning Commission, it goes to the Town Council and back and forth and things like that. That's what happens on the Tuesdays. So what happens between the Tuesdays? You know, are you going out and talking to people? Are you reaching out to the people about what's going on, how it's going to impact you? Are you asking folks outside of the developers for impact and feedback issues that might be coming up with this? Are you going out and talking to the neighbors? Are you waiting for them to send you a petition? And there's lots of other things related to the town that isn't development. And that's most of what people want to talk about. So there's a great process in place regarding development that we can have feedback back and forth. But there's so much more that we should be talking about.
If I could just respond
Sure.
Briefly. There are other ways that we get citizen input. I kind of outlined the land use process, but we have an active committee structure in the town of Blacksburg where there's committees from everything from the housing and community development to there's a traffic committee, all sorts of things in different ways that we use to get feedback from citizens about the issues that are doing. And I know that other council members, I don't want to speak for other members of the town council, but I think that we all value citizen input and it's very important, and we're all involved in community organizations, civic organizations, and out there in the community listening to what people have to say.
Thank you. Changing directions slightly, but do you have thoughts on expanding Blacksburg transit access down Glade or Shadow Lake Road to the Meadowbrook area? I'll start with Pete.
Can you,
Do you have thoughts about expanding the Blacksburg transit down Glade or Shadow Lake to the Meadowbrook area?
The Blacksburg Transit's actually a really important part of my life and the decisions that I've made to be in town. I have epilepsy, and I chose the location of my home on a place that was by a bus route. I was able to walk to campus if I needed to, and for those of you who don't know, if you have epilepsy, you may or may not have a seizure at some point in time. And if you do, and your medication is not controlling it, that means that you can't drive for 6 months. So there's a big impact on that. You don't get epilepsy just from seeing a sign on an IMAX building as you drive by and things like that. It's something that's a part of you and you live with, and you make choices about how you live your life because of that. So I think my thoughts on whether or not we should have transit going out that direction don't matter, because I don't live out that way. I think we need to talk to the people who live out that way or who may want to live out that way and see if that's something that they would enjoy having, if it would be helpful to them. There might be other places that we need to be going. So I think that, yes, there are resources that are out in that direction that people may want to take advantage of, but there might not. The things that I've heard more often is that the Blacksburg Transit primarily is in support of the university. The university is the hub for the Blacksburg Transit, and that's fine. But it also is very limited when the university is not in operation. The weekends, things drop down to practically nothing. In the summer, over breaks, it's hard for the people who depend on that Blacksburg Transit system to get where they need to go. So I think it's not about my thoughts on that. I've shared with you why I've chosen to live where I live and how I used Blacksburg Transit. But we need to go out and find the people who do have thoughts on that and act on their behalf.
Thank you. Michael?
Sure. So I would agree that we need to listen to folks and hear what they have to say about our transit service and where we're not serving the needs within the community. The town of Blacksburg recently went through updating our transportation strategic plan through Blacksburg Transit. There were community listening sessions. There was a survey. There was opportunity for community feedback. That plan does identify several areas where we would like to expand transit service in the future. I don't know if it includes that specific Shadow Lake Road, but two areas that are mentioned within that plan. One is kind of more on the northern end of town where there's not very much service currently for neighborhoods. Another is along Price's Fork Road. There's been a lot of development, as we've all seen, along Price's Fork just outside of the town of Blacksburg. And with that comes additional traffic. Transit service in those neighborhoods could do a lot to reduce some of that traffic. So I think that that's an area where we could have expanded transit service. Some of the challenges are the funding model that we currently have for Blacksburg Transit. General fund revenues don't go into transit. Transit's its own separate enterprise budget. It's paid through intergovernmental revenue, so that's grant funding, whether that comes from the state or the federal government. The contract with Virginia Tech is a large chunk of the transit funding that's coming in, so that affects what sort of service and what locations that are currently having service, and certainly Virginia Tech students are the largest users of Blacksburg Transit. But we can do more to support our neighborhoods and to support and expand our transit service. While I've been on the town council, one of the favorite votes that I've done was to make Blacksburg Transit fare-free. That's something that originally started during the COVID pandemic, but something that we've been able to make permanent so that residents that are using it don't have to show a card or pay a fare to use Blacksburg Transit on regular non-game days.
Thank you. This next question is somewhat transit related. Why was the 8-story apartment building approved without ample parking? They will end up parking in the surrounding streets. And I'll send that to Michael first.
Sure. So this is in reference to the North Main Cambridge redevelopment. Parking was a part of the conversation that we had there. I think that the town council took into consideration different things. If you look at parking minimums, there are no parking minimums in downtown commercial for development. And we have had some developments that are near Virginia Tech campus, like the Edge, that do meet the 1.1 parking spaces per bedroom in the development, and it has too much parking, which is not a good use of space. I don't know what the exact formula should be for parking, but I'm willing to consider different proposals that come up and look at them on a case-by-case basis. But I would like to talk a little bit more about that specific development, because the Cambridge development was not an easy decision. I ultimately voted in favor because I believe it was in our long-term planning goals and addresses real challenges that are facing Blacksburg. As I mentioned earlier, in 2019, the Town Council adopted a resolution saying we would review student housing proposals on a case-by-case basis, considering whether they fit the comprehensive plan and our planning documents. That guidance was later incorporated into our comp plan. which specifically identified the Cambridge site as an appropriate location for mixed-use student housing close to campus and Main Street. Virginia Tech continues to grow, and if we don't provide student housing in the right location, the pressure falls on our neighborhoods. In October of 2005, that was my senior year in college, 63% of single-family homes in Blacksburg were owner-occupied. Last year, that number was just 44%. If we take no action, more family homes will be converted to student rentals, and our neighborhoods and schools will continue to feel the effects. Certainly, we've had the Blacksburg Town Council has approved a resolution asking Virginia Tech to freeze undergraduate enrollment. It did not listen. You'll look at the projections from the university showing 1% to 2% growth, and I'm out of time.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
Can you reread the question, please?
Yes. Why was the 8-story apartment building approved without ample parking? They will end up parking in the surrounding streets.
One way that you can answer that question was that building was approved without sufficient parking because the town council seemed to be representing that more bedrooms was more important than any other potential negative issue on that side. It was a building that was taller than would have been allowed by right. It was closer to the street. It was more dense. Less parking than is typically allowed. It eliminated a huge amount of retail space and commercial space that could have been used to support the residents up above. It was allowed because that wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. I feel like in that case, we were playing rock, paper, scissors. And everyone else that was out there saying that it's too close to neighborhoods, it's too tall, not enough parking, there's not enough resources for the people who are going to be living there. But the thing that beats in rock, paper, scissors every time, it seems like, is more bedrooms. If you have more bedrooms, you win. It doesn't matter. So the parking minimums, I think, I won't worry about that. There's good development. There's good places for development. There's great examples of development like we've seen in particularly the Union. The Union is in a location that has every resource that everyone would ever need within actual walking distance. The 801 North Main project has a high walkability score, but all you can do is walk to school, walk home, and walk across a dangerous intersection to bars. There's nothing else for these people to do there. It's unfair to put 900 people. It's not a 700 something. It was increased after it was originally put in.
Thank you. Your time's up.
If I could just respond briefly.
Can I actually ask this next question, which will give you a rather open-ended type question that would give you an opportunity to respond. So this is a very open-ended question that we'd like to get your thoughts on. And the question reads, what are your thoughts regarding smart growth for the town? So that, to me, gives you an opportunity to explain what smart growth means to you. I'm sure different people may have different ideas about exactly what that means. And I'll go back to Peter, and then Mike will have 2 minutes.
Well, since you had something you wanted to address first, would you like to start?
I can include it in the smart growth.
Okay, sure. So it's interesting. I'm curious if smart growth is being considered a specific approach, or if it's just a adjective and a verb in this case. But
tell us what it means to you.
What it means to me. What it could mean to me is that we're making choices that are going to be successful. And it's not having choices that will only be successful in one way. We've seen growth happen in Blacksburg. If we look at places like First and Main, it was an opportunity for growth. There was one way that First and Main could viably work. It didn't work because it wasn't the Walmart, it was the movie theater that had to be a part of that. When the movie theater dropped out because the Walmart dropped out, everything fell apart. The restaurants dropped out, all sorts of things fell. That hasn't even failed, it hasn't even started. That project hasn't finished starting. So we have to be smart about this, and we have to be smart by learning from our mistakes before. We did the same thing with Gilbert Place. Gilbert Place was supposed to have a Target in it. Target dropped out, the whole thing falls apart, still isn't there. We have another giant place coming in on 801 North Main Street. What could potentially go wrong? It's the biggest thing we've ever built in Blacksburg. Why do we think there'd be any problems? So I think being smart about our growth is making sure that we have the resources in the right places of where we're building places that the people are going to be living. We have to make sure that the areas support one another, that they're almost self-contained. And if you look at things, smart growth approach of things like the strong towns, you know, where you're doing incremental growth, you're taking small steps along the way so that if something goes wrong, you can make a turn. But when you're making these big jumps, it's not smart. You're going to fall.
Thank you. Michael.
Sure. So smart growth is an approach to urban planning and land use that was popularized in the 1970s. It was a response to the automobile-centric development of earlier decades, where there was a separation of uses within zoning so that residents were over here and their jobs were over here. It increased traffic. This automobile-centric development, and smart growth was an approach that tried to move away from that. It tried to connect land use planning with transportation planning and respond to the sprawl that had come about from earlier models of urban development. It encouraged things like public and alternative transportation, building and increasing residential density along transit lines and public transportation uses. It encouraged the use of open and green spaces, of small neighborhood scale commercial development within neighborhoods so that someone could, for example, go to a coffee shop near their neighborhood instead of having to drive across town to do that. And it also encouraged building up and not out, and creating more walkable spaces with connected streets. It's a good approach to urban development and urban planning and something that I support and I've supported throughout my time on town council. This approach has taken other names and other forms over the years. Sometimes it's called new urbanism. Sometimes groups like the Strong Town Group, there's a Strong Towns group in Blacksburg, has taken elements from this smart growth approach and incorporated it in some of their talking points and some of their language. And in fact, I actually wrote a op-ed in the Collegiate Times back in 2009 about smart growth and my support for smart growth. So I encourage you all to go and read that. I do like to say one thing about the Target. The reason the Target didn't come in is because of the COVID pandemic, and Target changed its model and no longer builds collegiate-size Targets. So in case anyone was wondering about that.
Can I reply
Thank
to
you.
that, please?
Yes.
It's not about the Target. COVID changed everything, but something always has the potential to come up to make something fail. And my point is not that Target left and then it failed. It's that there was no plan B. There was only a plan A for several of these projects that go up. And when there's no plan B and there's no plan C, it puts everything at risk.
Thank you. Our next question is, how will your leadership style differ from the current mayor? And I think I need to go back to Michael for this.
Sure. So the mayor's in the audience, so this makes it an interesting question for me to answer. I do come to the position in my role as vice mayor and my leadership experience that I've had over the years. I do come to it from a different perspective from some of the current leadership in town. Unlike our current mayor, I was a Virginia Tech student, so I've experienced life in Blacksburg from both the town and gown side. I've also, we've voted differently on various issues over the years. I voted against a rezoning on Airport Road for a housing development that I didn't think had sufficient kind of buffering with its nearby things. I also voted against what became the Park 37 redevelopment. So I do come from a different background. I do have a different voting record and a different record of service. But at the same time, I'm proud of the accomplishments that I've had over the years on the Blacksburg Town Council with all of my colleagues on the Blacksburg Town Council. We've been able to do a lot of incredible things. I mentioned making Blacksburg Transit fare free. We've also acquired hundreds of acres that we've been able to bring into the town of Blacksburg for parks and recreation space along Brush Mountain over the years. We've legalized backyard chickens. We've had all sorts of amazing accomplishments in the town of Blacksburg, and I'm proud of the kind of leadership that I've seen from my colleagues on the town council. But I do come from a little bit of a different background, have a different set of experiences, and I won't be a status quo mayor. I'll work on moving us forward as a community on the challenges that we have. We have a lot of big challenges, whether that's managing our growth, dealing with these student housing issues, dealing with these town gown types of issues that we've experienced over the years. If I'm fortunate enough to be elected mayor, I'll continue to work hard for you.
Thank you. Peter.
Also a difficult question because the mayor is in the audience. I think it's pretty clear that I would be different just because I haven't had the experience that Michael has had as far as having representation that he's working so closely to. I also was a Virginia Tech student. I have 2 degrees, been there, did that for 10 years. I was part of the administration there. My first leadership role was actually with the marching band, which I've shouted about so much lately. I was the executive officer for the marching band, and that was actually my first elected office. It's the largest student organization on campus. And that blew me away when I was, first of all, able to be elected, but then actually was successful in that. I played tuba. You don't let tubas get in charge of anything. But I really enjoyed that. And I enjoyed it because of the community and because of how open people were with talking to me. I want to make sure that everybody felt welcome in that band. And it wasn't just if they were in the band, it was if they were in the stands, it was if they're at a high school that we were playing at, anything like that. I've always wanted people to feel welcome wherever they are. I want them to feel loved wherever they are. I love this town, and I know you do too. This is a really uncomfortable room. You know, I first came into this room because I had a speeding ticket. There's actually bulletproof material down here because that's where the judge would sit. But I want everyone to actually feel happy to come into this room. I want them to feel welcome in this room. And I think the main difference that you would hear from me is that you would never hear that I want you to leave this town. And I don't mean to be rude, but that was very upsetting when I heard the mayor said, if you don't want to live in a studentville, you should have left years ago.
Thank you. I'm not sure this is entirely a fair question, but I'm going to go ahead and put it out there because somebody asked it, and we'll see what we can do to address it. And it has to do with absentee ownership of real estate, which Michael alluded to earlier. This question specifically asks about housing units that are only used for Virginia Tech athletic events. This questioner calls them hokey houses. I typically call them football houses. And there's some in my neighborhood, so I have a personal interest in this. But the question says, does the town have data on the number of housing units with absentee owners who only use the units for tech athletic events? If not, would you support collecting and publishing such data? And do you think this issue contributes to the housing shortage in Blacksburg? And if so, what might town council do to discourage such absentee ownership of real estate?
There's a lot of bullets in that.
That's a lot of bullets, and that's a lot of specifics. But and I'm afraid it's your turn, Peter, to go first. I'm not sure that's entirely fair.
You're afraid.
You okay with that?
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. So I guess the first part is, do I know if the town has that data? And this is my favorite answer. I do not know. It would be nice if everybody knew what data the town had. I don't know. But I'm hopeful that folks at the town do know that. What I do know is about 10 years ago, which was about 2 worlds away, there was a study done that was the impact of athletics on the New River Valley. And it was focusing pretty much on the financial side of things. And this little piece that's down in the bottom said that there was an estimated 1,400 homes in the New River Valley that were estimated by talking to realtors and by talking to season ticket holders for the football games that were only used for football. It's 10 years ago. The team was decent back then. It's different now. So I don't know how those things are being used. But that's the New River Valley. So let's look at that in Blacksburg. It would be really nice if we could do another study like that. And it would be great if we knew some people who knew how to do research and study things. And the funny thing is, just across the street here, this is a place called Virginia Tech. You may have heard of it. And we have opportunities to work with them. Not work with the administration, but the faculty and the students. The faculty and the students who have projects that they want to have in real-world experiences, and we could have them repeat this study specifically for this information and have it in a way that we could share with everyone. Because I think it's really important, especially when you're talking about housing. I'm sure there's an impact on housing if some of these things are in place. We need to know what it is. We need to look in our pantry and see what's there. We need to see if there's incentives we can give to people who really aren't interested in watching football anymore that can maybe get them to return those bedrooms back to the pool, and maybe even encourage them to return them to folks who are specifically lower middle income house, that in lower middle income situation.
Thank you. Michael.
Sure. So there was a lot of bullet points in that, so I'll try to get to everything. This is certainly an issue that I care about. My own neighborhood, my next-door neighbor, they live in Maryland, and they come to visit. They purchase the unit not for their college students, but only for them when they're coming to visit for things like football games or graduation weekends. It certainly affects. I don't think we have data that shows the exact impact on the housing market, but it certainly affects the character of our neighborhoods when we have houses that are not being utilized except for 6 home game weekends a year. So it is an issue that we're experiencing in the town of Blacksburg. I don't think that the data exists. We do have some limited data on, you can look at GIS data that's available from the town of Blacksburg, and all of our data is publicly available either on our website or through the Freedom of Information Act that would show which houses are owner-occupied and which are not owner-occupied. So if the address on the listing is specific, if the owner's address is the same as that address, we could determine that, but we can't determine how many are just being used for football game weekends or how many days a year someone is using their home. I guess we could conduct surveys or something like that. Some localities have tried to address this problem by doing what's sometimes called like a homestay tax, where your tax rate is additional, but you get a rebate if it's your primary residence and you live in the town that you're in. Unfortunately, Virginia doesn't give local governments the authority to do that. So that is something that we could go to the state legislature and ask them to do. I don't know how successful we would be in the current state legislature, but there's elections every year in Virginia, so we could certainly find out. We could also, as Pete alluded to, there is some great resources on Virginia Tech's campus, including the Center for Housing Research on campus. In fact, one of the members of that center, Mel Jones, is a member of our planning commission. So I think that this is something that we could take to that group and get some more information about as well. It certainly is a problem, and it affects the character of our neighborhoods, and I suspect it affects our housing market as well.
Thank you.
Could I reply?
That was a difficult question. Do you want another minute?
Yeah, less than a minute would be fine. There actually is, for folks who are doing Airbnb, if you are in residence while you're renting out your space, you pay less of a fee to the town. That fee is coming directly from Airbnb. There is a higher rate if you are not owner-occupied during that time. So that it is something that the state allows, not necessarily through a tax rate, but the fees that are coming from Airbnb are different if you are living in the home versus not present at the time.
Thank you. On a very different subject, do you see a need to develop a town policy to set expectations for when immigration and customs enforcement agents show up? That's just a little bit out of local government, but some local governments are addressing it, so I will go ahead and ask the question, and I'll start with Michael.
Sure. So just to give a little bit of background, this is certainly something we've talked about in the town of Blacksburg. Blacksburg has a new police chief. and we've talked about it with both previous police chiefs and the current one. The Blacksburg Police does not ask immigration status. It does not do immigration enforcement either. This is certainly something that has been in the news recently with the headlines that were about a Virginia Tech student that was arrested by Blacksburg Police and is now in ICE custody, or was at some point in ICE custody. That occurred because in that particular situation involving the Blacksburg Police, that student was taken to the Montgomery County Jail. The town of Blacksburg does not operate a jail. Often when ICE is working with local governments, it's working with places that are that do operate jails. The town of Blacksburg and our new police station does have a temporary holding facility, but it doesn't have a jail. So ICE isn't working with the town of Blacksburg, and I, as mayor, would not support the town of Blacksburg working with ICE at all. I've been very disappointed in the headlines that we've seen, not just the local one about the Virginia Tech student, but the headlines all around the country about immigration enforcement and some of the things that are happening in our country that's been incredibly disappointing to me. I think that, I think that that's covers the, there's a second part of that question, I think. I'm not sure that
I think you've covered it.
Okay.
It was about town policy, and
yeah. So there have been folks that have come to the town of Blacksburg before and asked about becoming a sanctuary city. The challenge with doing that, though, is that the town of Blacksburg doesn't currently have a relationship with ICE, so it doesn't really make sense because we don't operate, again, those like jail facilities to kind of continue to do a resolution to that effect.
Thank you.
Do you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, it has to do with, do you see a need to develop a town policy to set expectations for when immigration and customs enforcement agents show up? It has to do with town policy related to working with ICE.
I'm going to speak to that a little differently. I think we should have a town policy of informing our community as to what is appropriate for people who are maybe approached in that situation. What's the legal way for them to be approached? How should they be talked to? What questions should you answer? Who should you reach out to if you need help? It's not a Virginia Tech student that this happened to. This was the roommate of one of my bakers.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I just need a second. This didn't just affect an individual. This affected his community of his roommate. I hope you don't mind me sharing a little bit about this. He's lost his roommate. Where is he going to live now? He has to be able to afford a place on his own. Where is his friend? How does he get to see him? Was any of this legal? What happened? So we may not need a policy that's in place that says what's allowed, but we need to make sure that everybody knows, if this happens to you, this is what you should do, this is what you can do, and this is how we can support you. There's some things we can't do as a town, but there's things that we can do as a community. And you shouldn't be scared in that situation. You should have as much information as you can to prepare yourself, to protect yourself, and to keep your friends and your loved ones safe.
Thank you. We have just a few more questions, and we'll try to get through them because we're doing pretty well on time. The next one is back to housing affordability, and we'll see what we can do with this. Between affordable housing availability and increased risk from climate change weather events, what regulatory and policy tools can the town use to encourage developers to build missing middle housing and in a climate-resistant manner, a climate-resilient manner. So the question is addressing both missing middle housing and climate resilience, resilience to changing weather conditions. That's a lot right there. So
if I could answer that, yeah, if I could answer that, oh my gosh, I'd be saving the world.
That's right. Would you like to share a few thoughts?
I would like to share a few thoughts, absolutely. I think that, so housing affordability is interesting. You know, there's a study that I listened to this cool podcast, and of course all podcasts are cool. And it was these folks up in Connecticut did this study to try to look at affordability, and they were looking at like, okay, well, what's causing the prices to go up? And you look at all the bad guys in the situation. You look at, okay, is it the developers? No, actually the developers, when they did the study, that wasn't much of an impact. And they looked at Airbnb, which is something we talked about, and they said, actually, Airbnb has kind of like 20% responsibility for these changes. But what they really saw that was a difference was the zoning. Zoning has the biggest opportunity to help change the affordability of homes. And it has to do with things like parking minimums and density in land and things like that. So we do actually, as a town, have the opportunity to make some of those changes. As far as the other pieces, I'm not quite sure. But one of the things that I really liked about Blacksburg, a program we had a little while back, and this wouldn't necessarily make the houses more affordable, but would make them more affordable to live in once you got to them, is we had the Solarized Blacksburg program. It was an opportunity where everybody in town had the chance to get more affordable solar on their homes. It makes their energy bills go down. We could do something like winterize Blacksburg. We could do the same green lighting on the type of work that would come up. We could have the whole town sign up for these things. We could fast track the work that's getting done. And you could have houses that were more resilient to the weather, have better roofs, siding, windows, things of that sort. And you could take some of the money that we're getting for affordable housing programs from projects like the 801 North Main project, and you can use that money to pay for those improvements for folks who are low to middle income housing. Or if the folks who own the homes are willing to rent them to people in that category, you could pay for it as well. They've done something like this when I was on Lee Street. They had a program just like that, and it covered the same things.
Thank you. Michael.
So I think that's two questions masquerading as one question.
Yeah,
so I'll try to
with you there, but good luck.
I'll try to break that down and answer both of them. Certainly, housing affordability is one of the biggest issues that's facing the town of Blacksburg. When I was at stepping out just a few weekends ago, I ran into a teacher at Harding Avenue Elementary School who told me that she lives in Christiansburg because she can't afford to live in Blacksburg on a public school teacher's salary. She's also worried about the schools reducing the number of second-grade classrooms because there are fewer families with children that could afford single-family homes, and they've been converted into student rentals that aren't having kids in the K-12 system. So there's been some real impacts on our town, the housing challenges that we've been facing, and there's a lot of data to support this as well. There was a regional housing study, there was a housing study that was conducted back in 2021 asking residents what they see as the two biggest challenges that we're facing as we continue to grow. And one was the cost of housing, and the other was the availability of housing. I'm glad that you said, Pete, that zoning affects the affordability of homes, because I certainly agree with that. Addressing this issue means that we look at the full spectrum of our housing needs. I have supported zoning changes like the small lot residential ordinance. This creates an opportunity to do missing middle housing. I think that was mentioned in this question or one of the previous questions. So missing middle housing, that's things like townhomes, duplexes, smaller homes on smaller lots. In Blacksburg right now, we have a lot of larger homes on large lots where the prices are continuing to increase, and it's harder for a young family that's trying to start off and find a starter home. We also have a lot of large apartment complexes, many of which are designed for college students, but we need more housing that's in that middle. And there are certain zoning changes that we have made that can help address that, and there are some additional zoning changes that we can look at that can address that. And I have 7 seconds, and I did not get to the climate resiliency part, but I think that that is something that we can affect as we're talking through the development process to push developers to include sustainability components in the work that they're doing.
Thank you both. That was a tough question.
Can I make one quick comment?
Oh, sure.
I think, if I'm remembering right, there's going to be a comprehensive zoning sort of refit coming up for the town. and that's in 2027, I think. And that's an opportunity for us to really look at the whole thing at once. I think the changes that we've been making recently have really been sort of spot checks along the way and responses to opportunities that developers are bringing to us. But that big look is coming, and we have an opportunity to prepare for that.
I could just add one more thing, just piggybacking off of that. The last time that the town of Blacksburg did the full look at its zoning ordinance was in 1996, and since then we've been making kind of minor changes, like I mentioned, several different ordinances where we've made changes to our zoning ordinance, but we need to take a look at the whole thing and see if it's serving our community and seeing if it corresponds to our comprehensive plan. I think that the zoning kind of rewrite and the zoning measures that we're looking at are actually coming a little bit sooner. The town has already selected a consultant to try to help us through this process, and it will be beginning, if not at the end of this year, starting next year, to take a look at our zoning and how we can make improvements that address some of the challenges that we're facing, whether that's housing affordability, sustainability, growth and development, all sorts of issues that we're facing in the community.
Something to look forward to. Mm-hmm. This next question is related to emergency response, and I'm not entirely clear on the local government's role in emergency response. So what this questioner wants to know is how adequate is the local emergency response plan, particularly with regard to potential changes in the federal government's role with FEMA. So, Michael, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Sure, I'll do that. The town of Blacksburg recently approved a hazard mitigation plan. That was a plan that was developed by the New River Regional Commission, which I've previously served on, actually, which looks at different issues that affect not just one locality, but multiple localities in our area. So we approved the plan that they have developed, and that does open up the town of Blacksburg for additional FEMA funding when there is an emergency, but the plan itself is not limited to just emergency response. It has information in there about how do we prepare for the future when there are, because of climate change, the potential for even more types of issues. The plan identifies the biggest types of challenges that we might face in the town of Blacksburg, whether that's high winds, winter weather, things like we saw with Hurricane Helene that affected the town of Blacksburg, where we saw the shutdown of our water service for a period of time. How do we respond to these types of things? So this hazard mitigation plan, we were certainly eligible for certain FEMA funding, but this opens us up to others. And I know that the town of Christiansburg and Montgomery County, other localities are looking at approving this plan as well, which will help us make us better prepared as a region. So it is something that local governments are involved in and certain conversations that we're having locally.
Thank you. Peter.
I'm glad that you know some of these pieces. I think that I can mostly speak to the concept of what do we do in the case of an emergency and the government isn't able to provide help. And that is happening more and more. The opportunities for federal support, state support are changing. And as much as possible, we need to be as self-sufficient as we can be. And that means relying on our community and understanding what our capacity is to support one another. During COVID, we had a very different situation where I was at the farmer's market, maybe you've heard of me, at the farmer's market, Blacksburg Bagels. And we were locked down so that we could only have 10 people at the farmer's market at a time, because that was the policy coming down. I worked with our representatives, and I talked to the folks at the Department of Agriculture, getting the word all the way up to the governor, because the governor was the one who was setting those plans and saying who could be where and how many people could be there. The farmer's market wasn't doing anything. The town wasn't aware of it. Everybody's dealing. I'm not saying they should have. I'm saying that there are people who are aware of things who need to take action, and they need to be able to get things up the chain. But I was so excited at the support that I had working with the county and the state and the levels all the way up to get the support for the farmers markets to be opened up and to be treated like a grocery store and not a restaurant. It was one of the safest places to get food. It was the most available food we had. My bakery was baking thousands of pounds of bread for food pantries. We were baking for churches so that they could have communion bread. That was a way that we were able to support one another, that my business was able to support one another, and that was just one way to do that. And I think we all need to find opportunities to do that, because when things fall apart, we're on our own, but we're not alone.
Thank you. This next question is a little bit in the weeds with state and local government relations, but we'll give it a shot. What additional tools would you like the town to have in its toolbox that it does not currently have because we are a Dillon rule state? Do you want to take that, Pete? You want me to?
Yeah, I like this one, actually.
All right.
So one of the things that a town can do, a locality can do, that Virginia allows a locality to do, is they can require property owners of vacant properties to register them, to pay fees while they're vacant, to have inspections while they're vacant, and to maintain them in such a way that they can be returned to use as soon as someone is there who can rent them. We have demolition by neglect like crazy in this town. I was on the Historic Design Review Board, which wasn't easy to get onto. I had to go before the review board when they were looking at the makeup of that organization. The Historic Design Review Board looks at the historic district contributing structures, see what we can do there type of thing, provide feedback on that. There was no requirement for anyone who lived in the historic district to be on that board at that time. And so I went there and I spoke at those meetings, and I was very happy that they made 3 new spots, 2 for resident property owners and 1 for a non-resident property owner. We had representation for my town on that board. The downside was I had to be on the board for several terms. But it was great because I learned about the impact of these types of things. And everybody says, we're in a Dillon rule state, we can't do anything about this, we can't do anything about this. But there are things that we can do, and that's one. I think it would be excellent if we did that. And it's not just for the downtown buildings, it's not for the historic buildings, but it's for any vacant property. Because one of the reasons that when developers come to us, one of the selling points a lot of times is saying, this is an unused property, everything's derelict, it's falling apart, no one's doing anything in there. But oftentimes, it's the property owners that are refusing to fix them, refusing to rent them out, refusing to keep them in the mix. And that's one of the ways that we can help prevent that.
Thank you. Michael.
Sure. So Virginia is a Dillon rule state, which means that unlike the relationship between the federal government and the state government, where they share responsibilities through federalism, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, state governments enumerate the different kinds of things that local governments are allowed to do, but local governments aren't allowed to expand outside of those things without going to the state legislature and asking them. Fortunately, local governments have given broad authority in certain areas, such as land use planning, zoning, comprehensive planning, budgets, taxes within a certain range, those sorts of things. So we do have a lot of authority. In fact, there was a study comparing different states and the relationship to local governments, and I forget the specific name of the study. And you would imagine, but because Virginia is a Dillon rule state, that we would be on the lower end on the relationship between state and local governments, what they can do. But actually, we were several places higher than you would expect in Virginia. So we do have some room to do certain things, but often there are things. There have been issues that have come up since I've been on the town council that we could not pursue, actually related to the vacant property issue, and this happened actually before I was on the town council. At one point, the town of Blacksburg went to ask the state legislature of whether it could create a registry of vacant properties, and it was originally the town of Blacksburg was denied that, so I'd have to look to see what Pete was talking about tonight to see if the law has changed or if the relationship between or if there's some sort of case law or something like that that has changed that has affected whether we're able to do that now. Certainly, like a registry would be a first step. Some types of enforcement measures would be an additional step on those vacant properties. But there's been things all along the way, from having a two-way cycle track along the one-way part of Draper Road, for example, was something that we had to request from the state legislature. So this Dillon rule thing is a problem that we face.
Sorry, time's up. I've lost track of that.
Quick comment.
Okay.
You're right. It wasn't allowed before, but it is a recent addition. So.
Cool. Thank you both. All right. This next question asks about the town's support of the historic Oddfellows and St. Luke's African American history sites. And what would you like to see from town council regarding these sites going forward? So I believe, Michael, it's your turn to start.
Sure. So I think that Oddfellows Hall and St. Luke's Hall is an important part of our history. I believe it's the last remaining structure of the new town of African American neighborhood that was in the town of Blacksburg. And we need to work to protect it, and I believe that we have worked to protect it. We recently, over the past year, have heard from some community members who have come to our council meetings and council work sessions to speak about different things that they would like to see at St. Luke and Oddfellows Hall. We have set up, our town manager has set up a working committee that's working through these issues. We also have an active standing committee that's working on it. I know Susan Anderson, who's in the audience tonight, and others have been involved in this work. There was a report that was produced by an outside organization called a CAP report that was looking at the different capital needs that needed to take place in the building. That working group that the town manager set up looked through different issues and identified what sort of investments that we can make. So in our recent capital improvement plan that we improved, it included over $100,000 of additional improvements on St. Luke and Oddfellows Hall. So that's kind of one thing, because the town is the owner of the building. It is managed, and the programming that's on it is done through the Blacksburg Museum and Cultural Foundation, but the town has a responsibility to protect the physical structure. Another thing that we've done is when there have been developments that have been in that kind of downtown northwest district, we have worked to make sure that there's adequate buffer and that the Oddfellows Hall is protected. So when that tall building that was built by the Virginia Tech Foundation, we did everything from a shadow study to see how the shadows would affect that building to agreements about signage and different types of things to support Oddfellows Hall.
Thank you. Peter.
So I was first introduced to that building when I was on HDARB, the Historic District Review Board. And we got to tour through it as it was kind of in a very rough shape, but it's beautiful now. And they've done such great work there, and they have wonderful events, and the community that comes out is just amazing. I haven't been out there too much, but the times I've gotten out there, great conversations, great history, and I think that protecting the culture of it as well as the structure of it is just as important. And around that building, yes, we're doing more construction, and there's an opportunity for some really significant construction on that northwest side. So you're talking about the space where there's the old tap house, the antique building, the apartments that were there. You're right next to the El Rodeo and the Wendy's and where Substation 2 was, all those types of places, and McDonald's. That spot is ripe for development. And there is a target on it that we feel that that's probably going to happen. It would be amazing if from Oddfellows all the way to Mossa to the Virginia Tech Center for the Arts, if there was a pathway of culture and community and arts that everyone could enjoy, that would be amazing. Because the formerly Moss Art Center was just an amazing contribution to the town. And we could represent the same type of thing right across the street. And it could be a pathway right to our history. Because even if we aren't necessarily a part of that culture, we're part of that community, and it's beautiful, and I would love to see that happen. We need to protect that pathway.
Thank you. This is going to be our last question. You can heave a big sigh of relief. We've wrestled with a lot of very serious issues, And you've actually touched on this in some of your previous statements, but this will be a final opportunity for you to give a brief account of your prior public or community service that makes you the best candidate for the office of mayor. And I'll start with you, Peter.
Public or community service?
Yep.
Yeah. So I mentioned Hadarb. That was sort of my first opportunity of really like working with the town. And I was honestly very glad that there was an opportunity for me to communicate with the town to make it be a place that I could be and my neighbors could be a part of, because that was huge. A lot of my contributions to the community have honestly come through my work with my business. And it's not necessarily what my business does. It's not the bread we bake necessarily. But we're a conduit for those of you who I am so blessed that you make the choice to come to our shop and you buy a loaf of bread or you buy some bagels or pizza dough or all the other things we have, instead of just turning around at the grocery store and grabbing it off a shelf. And because of that, I feel it's my responsibility. If you're going to make that choice to support me, I'm going to support the community. So for several years, my bakery celebrated Community Week. It was actually in celebration of my father, but also Independence Day. Because independence to me means that it wasn't just shaking our fists and saying, no, King, you can't tell us what to do. It was saying we're ready to take care of ourselves now, and watch how we do it. And so for those weeks, we donated 100% of our sales, not our profits, 100% of our sales to any organization that any of my bakers wanted it to go to. Over the past 10, 12 years that I've had Blacksburg Bagels, we've been able to contribute over $30,000 to community organizations, to projects, to students, everything. Over 4 tons of bread have been donated to food pantries. And while I may not have in-room experience, there's so many other things that happen between the Tuesdays. And that's how I've supported my community.
Thank you. Michael.
Sure. So I actually brought a handout tonight. If anyone would like to see about my public and civic experience, I was first elected to the Blacksburg Town Council in 2011, so I took office in January of 2012, and I've been reelected 3 times since then. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, this is my second stint as our vice mayor, and in that role, I've had the opportunity to serve in the capacity. I've been going to a lot more ribbon cuttings you might have seen me at. I've chaired meetings in the absence of the mayor. I have served on particular committees that the vice mayor is assigned to, whether that's the Greater Montgomery Liaison Group or the Virginia Tech Blacksburg Liaison Group. The vice mayor and the mayor are on a lot of, they do a lot of representation of the town of Blacksburg to our regional folks. I previously served for 2 years on the Planning Commission, and those 2 years happened to be when we were discussing the old Blacksburg Middle School development, and got that through kind of the Planning Commission process. That isn't the period of time I would recommend anyone have served on the Planning Commission, because we had a whole lot of meetings during that time. I also, during that time, graduated from the Virginia Certified Planning Commissioner program. This is a statewide program talking about land use issues, comprehensive planning, zoning, those sorts of things. I have been on a long list of different committees over the years. I mentioned earlier I've served for over 10 years on the New River Valley Metropolitan Planning Organization. I'm a member of the Main Street Connect Merchant Group. All of our council members represent the town of Blacksburg on some sort of economic development thing, whether that's the Blacksburg Partnership or Downtown Blacksburg, Inc. I'm the representative to Main Street Connect, which is another merchant group that we have in our community. Outside of the town of Blacksburg, I've also been involved. I was a board member for 7 years and the board chair of Equality Virginia, which is the state's leading LGBT advocacy organization. And if you want more information about my civic service and my civic involvement, you can check out my website.
Time's up. All right. That wraps up our questions for the night. I will give you each an additional 2 minutes for a closing statement, if you would like. And I would ask our audience to thank our candidates for their time this evening and recognize yourselves for participating in democracy. So, thank you all. And since we started introductions with Peter, I'll start closing statements with Michael.
Sure. So thank you all for your thoughtful questions tonight and for taking the time to engage in the democratic process. This is so important. What you've heard tonight is a choice between two very different approaches to leadership. I've spent more than 13 years preparing for this moment, not just learning how local government works, but building the regional partnerships and the community relationships that make effective leadership possible. The mayor's job requires someone who can work with Virginia Tech while standing firm on our community values, who can balance competing priorities, and who can make tough decisions based on our long-term community benefit rather than short-term politics. I've proven I can do this work, and my record speaks for itself. I've approved eliminating bus fares to make transit accessible to everyone. I supported adding hundreds of acres of new recreation space. I voted for zoning changes that create housing opportunities for folks at all levels. I've consistently supported capital investments that support both our neighborhoods and our growing economy. But I also bring a different perspective to town leadership, which you've heard about tonight. As someone who started here as a student, I understand the university experience and the importance of that relationship. As a former board member and chair of the state's LGBT advocacy organization, I know what it means to fight for inclusion and to ensure that every voice is heard. As someone who's worked on regional boards for over a decade, I've built partnerships that will be invaluable as mayor. Blacksburg faces some complex challenges: infrastructure needs, housing affordability, managing growth, all of the issues that we talked about tonight. These aren't problems that you can solve while learning on the job. They require experience, established relationships, and proven leadership. I'm also not running to be a status quo mayor. I'm running to be a mayor who moves our community forward, who builds on our strengths while addressing our challenges head on. The stakes are too high for anything less. I'm asking for your vote because I have the knowledge to do this job, the vision to guide us forward, and the commitment to ensure Blacksburg remains a place for everyone. My name is Michael Sutphin, and I would appreciate your support on Election Day. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out. It has been an amazing journey to even consider the process of running for mayor. And one of the main reasons why I didn't consider it before or for running for council was because I felt like I was already doing important work in the town. I didn't want to have to stop doing that. There's so many people in this town that are doing amazing work for the community, and they feel that they can't be a part of town council or they can't be a part of committees because it is so much of a commitment that they need to stop everything that they're doing and do that. But that's not the case. You can still do both. I hope to show that a lot of us can still do both. There's 3 other people who have not been on town council or running for town council. I really encourage you to come to the next meeting next week and learn about them. They're people who want to have a shot to get on there and make changes to their town. You shouldn't have to be on planning commission and then be on town council and then be the mayor. I have stood up to the university when I was at the university. I have been a student for a very long time. I am still a student. I know how to work with the students. I know how to work with the administration. I know how to work at the state level, and I've told you about how I've done some of those things. I was responsible for having a seat on a town committee because it wasn't even an option before. Things like that. To be able to have experiences by doing things is different than having experiences by being a part of something. It's different when you walk in the room and they're only going to let one person walk in the room and you have to stand up with the voice of everyone behind you. I would love to work with you, Michael. I would love to be a mayor with you. And I think you would be amazing support for me, as would the other council members that would be a part of that. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming. Thank you for your thoughtful participation. And as Peter noted, this is the first of 6 local government election forums that the League of Women Voters and the NAACP will be hosting over the next 6 weeks. And Karen Jones is here to tell us about it. Yeah, you should.
I don't feel like walking all the way there. But can we get our moderator, Peggy Lang, I want you all, again, to give yourselves a round of applause. Y'all asked some questions, which really just shows how important this may be. so not only do I expect to see all of you early vote on September 19th, but I expect to see all of you at next Thursday's Blacksburg Town Council Candidate Forum, along with each of the forums that we're having for the town of Christiansburg, because as you all know, what happens in Blacksburg affects Christiansburg, what happens in Christiansburg affects Blacksburg, and then also our forums for Montgomery County, for the supervisors and school board. Visit our websites and our Facebook pages for more information. Also, I encourage you to continue to ask your candidates the tough questions. Both of them are very available, right? Yes. And so thank you all so much, and we'll see you next week.